What's the most unreasonable crash out you've ever seen? Everyone thought Zayden was a little weird for collecting Pokemon, but what he did to our teacher changed the rest of our lives. Zayden, who sat 2 rows behind me in Mrs. Jimenez's 5th grade class. Mrs. Jimenez was literally the best teacher anyone could ask for, and what Zayden did to her still makes my stomach turn. Mrs. Jimenez was one of those teachers who actually cared about every single student. She had this prize box filled with candy and little toys that she'd let us pick from when we did well on tests. If you were struggling with homework, she'd stay after school to help you understand it better. She even called parents with good news when kids improved their grades, which was huge because most teachers only called for bad stuff. Zayden was obsessed with Pokemon cards. He brought his binder to school every day and spent recess trading with other kids instead of playing basketball or tag. His grades were terrible because he'd draw Pokemon during lessons and sneak peeks at his cards under his desk. Mrs. Jimenez caught him multiple times, but instead of taking the cards away, she tried to work with his interests. In early December, Mrs. Jimenez announced something that changed everything. She said whoever had the best grades by Christmas break would get a special surprise gift from her. She made it clear this wasn't about who was already smart, but who showed the most improvement and effort. Zayden's eyes lit up because he immediately assumed it would be Pokemon cards. From that day forward, Zayden completely transformed. He stopped bringing his card binder to school and actually paid attention during lessons. At recess, he'd sit inside doing extra math problems while the rest of us played in the snow. He raised his hand constantly asking questions and turned in homework early, asking if he could do extra credit assignments. The change was so dramatic that other kids started noticing. Zayden went from failing spelling tests to getting perfect scores. His handwriting improved because he was actually trying instead of scribbling. During group projects, he became the leader, making sure everyone understood their parts. Mrs. Jimenez praised him constantly and called his mom twice to share the good news. By the last week before break, it was obvious Zayden would win. He'd gone from D's and F's to straight A's in just 3 weeks. He talked non-stop about what Pokemon cards Mrs. Jimenez might give him. He researched which card sets were available in stores and made lists of the rarest cards he hoped to get. Some kids tried to tell him it might not be Pokemon cards, but he wouldn't listen. On the last day before Christmas break, Mrs. Jimenez held a little party. She gave out candy canes and we played educational games. At the end, she called Zayden to the front of the room. She handed him a wrapped box about the size of a shoebox and told him how proud she was of his hard work. Zayden's hands were shaking as he held the present. Mrs. Jimenez said he could open it at home and share what it was after break. Zayden looked disappointed but thanked her and carefully put the gift in his backpack. We all went home excited for 2 weeks off from school. I figured Zayden would post about his cards online since most of our class followed each other on social media. That night, everything exploded on Instagram and TikTok. Zayden had posted a video ranting about Mrs. Jimenez that made everyone uncomfortable. He was literally crying and screaming at his phone camera. The gift was a Pokemon holiday calendar box, which at the time costed $70. But Zayden was furious because it contained promo cards and stickers instead of booster packs with rare cards. He called Mrs. Jimenez horrible names that I won't repeat. He said she'd tricked him and wasted his time making him study for nothing. He showed the promo cards, throwing them around his room saying they were worthless. He kept repeating that all his effort was for nothing and that he'd given up playing with friends for garbage cards. The rant went on for 10 minutes, getting worse with each second. The comments on his video were brutal. Kids from class told him he was ungrateful and spoiled. Parents who followed the class accounts were disgusted by how he talked about Mrs. Jimenez, but Zayden doubled down, posting more videos saying Mrs. Jimenez needed to face consequences for lying to him. He said he had plans to make things right when school started again. Most of us forgot about it over break, assuming Zayden was just being dramatic. He'd probably apologize when school started and everything would go back to normal. I didn't think much about it while opening my own presents and enjoying the holidays. Zayden had always been a little weird about his Pokemon cards, so this seemed like typical behavior until it wasn't. I got to school late on the first day back because of unexpected traffic. The parking lot was weirdly empty and I had to run to make it before the bell. When I walked into class, everyone was crying. Kids had their heads down on their desks and others were hugging each other. Even the tough kids who never showed emotion had red eyes. I looked around, confused, until a girl named Alicia grabbed my arm. Her face was covered in tears as she stared at me. "You didn't hear about the accident?" She squeezed my arm harder, and more tears rolled down her face. Mrs. Jimenez hit black ice 3 nights ago driving home from the grocery store. My backpack slipped off my shoulder and hit the floor. She's in the hospital with really bad injuries and nobody knows when she can come back. The room started spinning around me. Other kids were watching us now and I could see their red puffy eyes. I remembered Zayden's videos from Christmas break and how he screamed at his camera about Mrs. Jimenez. My stomach felt sick thinking about all those mean comments people left on his posts. The timing made everything feel wrong and scary. I sat down at my desk because my legs felt weak. Alicia went back to her seat and put her head down on her arms. The classroom door opened and Principal McDowell walked in wearing his dark blue suit. He looked tired and his voice was quiet when he started talking. "I know you've all heard about Mrs. Jimenez and her accident." He walked to the front of the room and stood by her empty desk. "She's stable now but has a long recovery ahead of her." Some kids started crying harder when he said that. "We need to be patient and kind with each other during this difficult time." I raised my hand before I could stop myself. "Can we make cards for her to show we care?" Mr. McDowell shook his head slowly. "Her family has asked for privacy right now while she heals." Everyone looked disappointed because we all wanted to do something to help our teacher. He stayed for a few more minutes answering questions, but nobody asked what we were all thinking about. At lunch, the cafeteria was quieter than usual. Kids sat in small groups whispering to each other. I heard Zayden's name over and over as I walked past different tables. "Did you see those videos he posted?" Someone asked at the table next to mine. "My mom said the police might be involved," another kid whispered back. Nobody wanted to say out loud what we were all thinking. We all remembered how angry Zayden was in those videos and how he said Mrs. Jimenez needed to face consequences. The empty seat where Zayden usually sat made everything feel worse. Rumors started spreading that he was in huge trouble. Some kids said they saw a police car at his house, but nobody knew if that was true. Others said his parents pulled him out of school forever. The stories got wilder as the day went on. The next morning, our classroom felt different without Mrs. Jimenez there. The substitute teacher tried to start regular lessons, but nobody could focus. Around 10 o'clock, the door opened and Ms. Contreras walked in carrying a big box. She was the school counselor and usually only came when something really bad happened. "Hi everyone, I'm here to help you talk about your feelings." She put the box on Mrs. Jimenez's desk and started pulling out tissues and coloring pages. It felt weird because we were in 5th grade, not kindergarten, but when she handed me a coloring page of butterflies, I started coloring anyway. Something about moving the crayons back and forth made me feel a little better. Other kids started coloring too, and the room got quiet except for the sound of crayons on paper. Miss Contreras sat on the edge of Mrs. Mrs. Jimenez's desk and looked at all of us. Would anyone like to share a favorite memory about Mrs. Jimenez? Every single hand shot up at the same time. She pointed to a boy named Tony first. He told us about the time Mrs. Jimenez stayed after school for 2 hours, helping him understand fractions. Then Sarah shared how Mrs. Jimenez called her mom with good news when her reading improved. We spent the whole hour telling stories about our teacher. Some stories made us laugh, like when she dressed up as a giant pencil for Halloween. Other stories made us cry, like when she bought lunch for a kid who forgot his money every day for a week. Everyone had something special to share about her. After the group session, Ms. Contreras asked to see me and 3 other kids individually. I went to her office, which had soft chairs and pictures of sunflowers on the walls. She closed the door and sat across from me with a notebook. I heard you might have seen some concerning things online over break. My hands started sweating because I knew she meant Zayden's videos. I told her everything about the 10-minute rant and how he threw the Pokemon cards around his room. She wrote down every detail I remembered, including the parts where he said Mrs. Jimenez needed to face consequences. Thank you for being brave enough to tell me this. She kept writing in her notebook for a long time after I finished talking. That afternoon, we were doing math problems when the classroom phone rang. The substitute answered it and then told us Principal McDowell sent an important email to all our parents. Kids started pulling out their phones to text their parents asking what it said. Within minutes, everyone knew the email was about concerning online behavior targeting school staff. He didn't use any names, but we all knew he meant what Zayden did to Mrs. Jimenez. Parents started texting their kids, telling them to delete any screenshots or videos they had saved. The substitute tried to get us to focus on math again, but nobody could concentrate. We all kept thinking about Mrs. Jimenez in the hospital and Zayden wherever he was, and how everything went so wrong so fast. 2 days later, a woman in a dark blue suit walked into our classroom, carrying a thick folder and a laptop. She introduced herself as Sophia Ammons from the district safety office and said she needed to talk to students who saw the videos. Her voice was calm, but serious, like she'd done this before with other schools. She pulled kids out one by one, starting with the ones who commented on Zayden's posts. When she called my name, my hands got sweaty, walking to the empty classroom she was using. She had papers spread across the desk and her laptop open with some kind of form on the screen. She asked me to tell her everything I remembered about the videos Zayden posted. I explained about the 10-minute rant and how he threw the Pokemon cards around his room. She typed while I talked and asked me if I had any screenshots saved on my phone. I pulled out my phone and showed her the pictures I'd taken of his posts before they got deleted. Her face changed with each image, getting more worried as she scrolled through them. She stopped at the one where Zayden told people to message Mrs. Jimenez directly and wrote something in her notebook. She asked if I knew who else had screenshots, and I gave her names of other kids. After she finished with all of us, she came back to tell the whole class something important. She said hundreds of people had sent mean messages to Mrs. Jimenez's school email after Zayden posted it. Some messages were so bad she couldn't tell us what they said, but her face showed how serious it was. The next Monday, we got a new substitute teacher named Hugh Gallegos, who seemed nice but nervous. He kept looking at Mrs. Jimenez's desk like he didn't want to touch her things. He tried to follow her lesson plans, but it felt weird having someone else teaching us. During math, he accidentally knocked over her coffee mug and apologized 3 times even though it was empty. Kids kept staring at her empty chair, and some started crying again during silent reading time. Mr. Gallegos didn't know what to do, so he just let them go to the bathroom to calm down. At lunch, kids whispered about whether Mrs. Jimenez would ever come back to teach us. 2 days later, during art class, something terrible happened that made everything worse. The art teacher was talking about perspective drawing when someone asked if Mrs. Jimenez liked art. She started to say something, then stopped herself, but we all heard the first part. She'd said Mrs. Jimenez saw some of the messages before her accident, then quickly changed the subject, but the damage was already done, and everyone understood what that meant. Kids started crying harder than they had since the first day we found out. Even the boys who usually acted tough were wiping their eyes and looking at the floor. We all sat there imagining how Mrs. Jimenez must have felt, reading those terrible things about herself. The art teacher tried to get us back to drawing, but nobody could focus anymore. She ended up calling Miss Contreras, who came to get us early from art class. That Thursday morning, we saw Zayden for the first time since winter break. He was walking with his dad, Griffin Rocha, toward the main office when our class was coming back from PE. Zayden looked smaller somehow, with his shoulders hunched and his eyes on the ground. His dad had his hand on Zayden's shoulder, and they both looked serious and upset. We watched through the classroom window as they went into Principal McDowell's office and closed the door. Kids pressed against the glass trying to see what was happening, but Mr. Gallegos told us to sit down. Nobody talked about it, but we all wondered what kind of trouble Zayden was in. Later that day, Ms. Contreras pulled me and 3 other kids who'd witnessed the online post for another meeting. This time, she taught us about digital citizenship and how things we do online affect real people. She showed us examples of how fast things spread on the internet and how they never really go away. She explained that even deleting posts doesn't erase them because people take screenshots and share them. We learned that encouraging others to harass someone online can have serious consequences even for kids our age. She made us promise to tell an adult if we ever saw online bullying happening again. The next morning, Miss Ammons came back, but this time she had a police officer with her. They didn't come to our classroom, but we saw them in the principal's office through the window. Word spread quickly that the police were investigating whether the harassment was a crime. During lunch, Miss Ammons came to explain that what happened to Mrs. Jimenez was being taken very seriously. She said encouraging others to send mean messages could have legal consequences even for kids. She didn't say Zayden's name, but we all knew who she meant when she talked about consequences. That afternoon, parents started getting phone calls from the school about what was happening. By Friday morning, the whole thing was on the local news, though they didn't use any names. The reporter called it a tragic reminder of how online bullying can hurt real people. They interviewed some expert about digital safety, but didn't mention our school specifically. Parents started checking their kids' phones and computers more after seeing the news story. My mom made me show her all my social media accounts and deleted TikTok from my phone completely. Other parents called each other all weekend talking about what to do next. Monday morning, Mr. Gallegos stood at the front of our classroom, holding a white envelope in his hands. His fingers shook a little as he opened it and pulled out a piece of paper. He cleared his throat and started reading a letter from Mrs. Jimenez's daughter. The letter said Mrs. Jimenez was getting better slowly, but it would take months before she could walk again. She wanted us to know she loved all her students and wasn't mad at anyone. Mr. Gallegos' voice cracked when he read the part about forgiveness. Some kids started crying again, but it felt different this time. The letter made us feel a tiny bit better, knowing Mrs. Jimenez was thinking about us. At recess that same day, Zayden came back to our class for the first time. He walked onto the playground with his backpack hanging low on his shoulders. Kids who were playing basketball stopped and stared at him. The jump rope girls turned away and whispered to each other. Zayden went to sit on the bench where he used to trade Pokemon cards, but nobody joined him. During lunch, he sat alone at the end end of our usual table, picking at his sandwich. I watched him from 3 seats away, feeling bad, but not knowing what to say. Other kids kept looking over at him, then looking away quickly. Even the lunch monitors seemed uncomfortable walking past his table. Nobody was mean to him exactly, but nobody talked to him either. The whole cafeteria felt weird and tense whenever he was around. Tuesday afternoon, Ms. Contreras started something new called a peer support group. She gathered 12 of us in the library, including me and some other kids who'd seen Zayden's videos. She had us sit in a circle on the carpet like we were in kindergarten again. She explained that having complicated feelings about what happened was normal and okay. She said we could be really mad at what Zayden did, but still care about him as a person. She taught us that people aren't just one thing good or bad, but a mix of both. We practiced talking about our feelings using special sentence starters she gave us. Some kids said they felt guilty for not stopping Zayden's posts sooner. Others said they were scared something like this could happen again. Ms. Contreras listened to everyone without judging and helped us understand our emotions better. Wednesday night, the school sent out an emergency email to all parents. They announced new social media guidelines that every family had to follow. Parents had to attend a mandatory meeting Thursday evening about online responsibility. My mom groaned when she read it because she worked late on Thursdays. But when Thursday came, the auditorium was completely packed with concerned families. Parents stood along the walls because all the seats were taken. Principal McDowell explained the new rules about monitoring kids' online activity. Parents had to sign forms promising to check their kids' social media weekly. Some parents asked angry questions about privacy and trust. Others wanted even stricter rules after what happened to Mrs. Jimenez. The meeting went an hour longer than planned, with everyone arguing about the best approach. Friday morning, I was walking to the bathroom when I passed the main office. Through the open door, I heard Mr. Rocha talking to Principal McDowell in the hallway. He kept saying they had no idea what Zayden was posting online. His voice sounded tired and broken, like he hadn't slept in days. He ran his hands through his hair over and over while he talked. Principal McDowell put his hand on Mr. Rocha's shoulder, trying to comfort him. Mr. Rocha said they took away all of Zayden's devices and were getting him help. He apologized again and again, saying they should have paid more attention. I hurried past, feeling weird about hearing such a private conversation. The next week, Mr. Gallegos announced we were starting a kindness project for Mrs. Jimenez. Every student would do one nice thing each day and write it in a special journal. He showed us a stack of blue notebooks he'd bought with his own money. We decorated the covers with stickers and drawings of things Mrs. Jimenez liked. Mr. Gallegos said when she felt better, we'd give her all the journals to read. Kids got really excited about the project and started planning their kind acts immediately. Some helped younger kids with homework, while others picked up trash at recess. We wrote down everything we did, trying to fill our journals with good deeds. Even small things like sharing pencils or holding doors got written down. Thursday morning, Zayden had to give each of us an apology letter he'd written. Miss Contreras walked with him as he went desk to desk, handing out the folded papers. His handwriting was shaky and hard to read in some places. You could see spots where tears had dropped on the paper, making the ink run and blur. The letter said he was sorry for what he did and knew he hurt everyone. He wrote that he let his anger control him and wished he could take it back. Some kids read their letters right away, while others stuffed them in their backpacks. Nobody said anything to Zayden as he handed them out. He kept his eyes on the floor the whole time. After he finished, Miss Contreras walked him back to his new classroom where he spent most of his days now. 2 weeks later, the whole 5th grade had to attend a special assembly about digital footprints. A lady from the district showed us how things posted online never really disappear. She pulled up examples of old posts that people thought were deleted but weren't. She showed us how screenshots last forever, even when original posts get removed. Everyone shifted uncomfortably in their seats, recognizing their own online behavior in the examples. She explained how colleges and jobs check social media years later. Kids who never thought about consequences before started looking worried. The assembly made everyone think differently about what they posted online. The biggest shock came when Missy Ammons visited our class the following Monday. She told us several adults who sent threatening messages to Mrs. Jimenez were facing criminal charges. We couldn't believe grown-ups had joined in the harassment after seeing Zayden's videos. She said some adults sent really scary messages that she couldn't repeat to us. The police tracked them down through their email addresses and social media accounts. Some of these adults were parents from other schools who didn't even know Mrs. Jimenez. Miss Ammons explained that threatening someone online was a crime no matter how old you were. 2 months after the accident in March, we finally got permission to make a video for Mrs. Jimenez. Mr. Gallego set up his phone on a tripod at the front of the room. Each student took turns saying something nice to the camera. Kids talked about their favorite memories and how much they missed her. Some sang songs or showed drawings they'd made for her. When it was Zayden's turn, he could barely look at the camera. His voice was almost a whisper as he said he was sorry and hoped she'd forgive him. He started crying before he finished, and Miss Contreras had to help him back to his seat. The video ended up being 20 minutes long with messages from every single student. The next week, Mrs. Jimenez's daughter walked into our classroom carrying a manila folder. She looked just like her mom, except younger, with the same dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Mr. Gallego stood up from the desk and shook her hand, while we all sat frozen in our seats. She turned to face us and pulled out a photo from the folder. The picture showed Mrs. Jimenez standing between 2 metal bars with a walker in front of her. She was wearing workout clothes and smiling, even though you could see the effort on her face. Her daughter held the photo up so everyone could see it clearly. We all started clapping without anyone telling us to, even though Mrs. Jimenez couldn't hear us through the picture. Some kids wiped their eyes while they clapped. Her daughter thanked us for the video and said her mom watched it 3 times already. She left after a few minutes, but that photo stayed in my mind all day. 2 days later, during morning announcements, Principal McDowell told us about a special school board meeting happening that night. My parents went while I stayed home doing homework. They came back, talking about how packed the auditorium was with parents and teachers from all the schools in our district. The board voted to create something called the Jimenez Protocol, which would protect teachers from online harassment. It included real punishments for students who posted mean things about teachers online. Parents would have to pay fines if their kids broke the rules. Teachers would get special email addresses that filtered out bad messages. The whole thing passed without anyone voting against it. Meanwhile, Zayden started disappearing from our class for parts of each day. Miss Contreras would come get him after lunch and bring him to a different room. Kids whispered that he was seeing a therapist twice a week now. Sometimes, he'd come back with red eyes like he'd been crying. Miss Contreras told us during one of our group sessions that Zayden was learning better ways to handle his feelings. She said getting mad was normal, but what mattered was what you did with that anger. Nobody made fun of Zayden for needing help because we all felt pretty messed up too. That Friday, Mr. Gallegos announced we were going to help Mrs. Jimenez with her medical bills. He showed us how to make bookmarks using cardstock and markers. Some kids drew flowers while others wrote nice messages on theirs. The PTA moms came in to help us bake cookies to sell too. We set up tables outside the school the next morning, even even though it was cold. Parents bought bookmarks for $5 each, even though they were just paper. The cookies sold for $2, and people gave extra money without asking for change. Other schools in the district heard about it and started their own fundraisers. By the end of the week, we'd raised over $3,000. The local newspaper took a picture of our class holding a giant check. Mr. Gallegos seemed really happy when he told us the next part. He said Mrs. Jimenez had watched our video message and cried happy tears. She wanted us to know she forgave everyone and couldn't wait to see us again. He read her message slowly, so we could all hear every word. Even the kids, who usually goofed around, stayed quiet while he read. Zayden put his head down on his desk, and his shoulders shook a little. After that, something interesting happened at recess. The kids who had written the meanest comments on Zayden's videos started apologizing to him. Not because any adult told them to, but because they felt bad about it. They said they were mad about Mrs. Jimenez, but shouldn't have been so mean online. Zayden nodded and mumbled thanks, but you could tell he was surprised. We were all learning that being mean back to someone who hurt you just made everything worse. One afternoon, I saw Zayden's mom come to pick him up early for a doctor appointment. I was walking back from the bathroom when I passed the parking lot window. She was sitting in her car with her head on the steering wheel, and I could see her shoulders moving like she was crying hard. When I told my mom about it later, she explained that parents hurt too when their kids make big mistakes. She said Zayden's mom probably blamed herself, even though it wasn't really her fault. Parents want their kids to be good people, and it hurts when they mess up. The next Monday, Ms. Contreras brought a big poster board to class. She said we were going to make a classroom contract about online behavior. We all gave ideas about what should be on it. Someone said we should think before posting anything. Another kid said we should tell adults if we saw cyberbullying happening. Ms. Contreras wrote everything down in neat handwriting. The contract said we promised to be kind online and remember that real people read what we write. Everyone signed their name at the bottom, including Mr. Gallegos. We hung it on the wall where everyone could see it every day. 3 months passed with things slowly getting better. Then one morning in April, Mr. Gallegos told us to gather on the carpet because someone special wanted to talk to us. He opened his laptop and connected it to the smartboard. The screen stayed black for a minute. Then suddenly Mrs. Jimenez appeared. She was sitting in what looked like her living room with pillows behind her back. Her voice sounded weaker and quieter than before, but her smile was exactly the same. Everyone started cheering and waving at the screen. Some kids jumped up and down with excitement. She waved back and I saw tears in her eyes. She told us she was proud of how we'd handled everything these past months. She said we'd grown so much and learned important lessons about kindness and forgiveness. Then she looked right at the camera and said something that made everyone go quiet. She told Zayden specifically that everyone deserves second chances, and she was proud of him for working so hard to make things right. Zayden started crying and couldn't stop. The whole class went quiet, watching him wipe his face with his sleeve over and over. Miss Contreras handed him tissues and rubbed his back, while Mrs. Jimenez kept talking about how proud she was of all of us. After the video call ended, Mr. McDowell came in with a stack of papers about a new program the school was starting. He explained that Zayden would be teaching second graders about being safe online as part of his community service hours. The judge had ordered 50 hours total, and the school arranged for him to do presentations every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. Zayden's hands shook as he took the information packet, but he nodded and said he'd do his best. The next week, I watched Zayden practice his presentation in the library during lunch. He had made a poster board with screenshots of his own videos circled in red marker with big X's through them. He practiced explaining to empty chairs how posting mean things hurt real people and could get you in serious trouble. His voice cracked when he talked about Mrs. Jimenez, but he kept going through the whole thing 3 times. When he actually gave his first presentation to the second graders, I peeked through the door window. The little kids sat cross-legged staring up at him as he showed them his poster and told them about his mistake. He answered their questions honestly, even when one kid asked if he went to jail. Meanwhile, our class started planning a big welcome back party for Mrs. Jimenez, who would return in May. Everyone picked jobs from a list Ms. Contreras made on the board. Some kids volunteered to make decorations, while others signed up to bring snacks or drinks. Zayden raised his hand and asked if he could make a poster about second chances. Ms. Contreras smiled and wrote his name next to that job on the list. We spent art class that week working on our party stuff with the art teacher letting us use special supplies. Zayden worked alone at a back table, carefully drawing letters that spelled out "Everyone deserves forgiveness," with pictures of hands reaching toward each other. Ms. Contreras also brought up the idea of writing a book about what happened to help other schools. She said we could each write a page about what we learned, and she'd put it all together. We took a vote with our heads down, and everyone raised their hand to donate any money the book made to programs that stop bullying. The PTA president came to our class to tell us about meetings for parents dealing with kids who misbehave online. She said Mr. and Mrs. Rocha had volunteered to lead the group since they'd learned so much from their experience with Zayden. My mom went to the first meeting and came home with a folder full of information about parental controls and warning signs to watch for. She said Mrs. Rocha cried while telling other parents about finding out what Zayden had done. The detective working on the case came to the school one last time in early May. He met with Mr. McDowell for an hour. Then they called Zayden and his parents to the office. Later, we found out that 3 adults who sent threats to Mrs. Jimenez had to pay fines and do community service. Zayden got something called a juvenile diversion program, which meant counseling twice a week and his 50 hours of community service instead of going to court. His dad had to sign papers promising to supervise him and make sure he followed all the rules. We practiced what we'd say when Mrs. Jimenez came back by role-playing with Ms. Contreras. She pretended to be Mrs. Jimenez while we took turns greeting her and showing her things we'd made. She reminded us that Mrs. Jimenez might get tired easily or need breaks. We all promised to be patient and not crowd her or ask too many questions at once. The school sent home flyers about free counseling for any student who needed help dealing with what happened. The counselors came from different offices around town and volunteered their time. My parents made me go to 3 sessions even though I said I was fine. The counselor was nice and mostly just let me talk about how weird it felt to have our class be famous for something bad. A lot of kids went, including some you wouldn't expect. By the middle of May, Zayden's grades had gone back up with help from his tutors and counselors. Kids started including him in group projects again instead of avoiding him. During a science project about ecosystems, my group needed one more person, and Zayden asked if he could join. We said yes, and he did his part of the research without anyone having to remind him. He even stayed after school to help us build the display. The school also started training older kids to be peer mediators for younger students having problems. They taught us how to listen to both sides and help kids work out arguments without fighting. Me and 5 other kids from our class volunteered to get trained. We had to go to special meetings every Wednesday where they taught us about conflict resolution. The last video update from Mrs. Jimenez came at the end of May, right before she was scheduled to return. She was walking around her backyard without without any help and even did some stretches to show us how strong she'd gotten. She said her physical therapist was amazed at her progress and cleared her to come back to work part-time. Everyone cheered and started talking about the party we'd been planning for weeks. The party turned out amazing with handmade decorations covering every wall and a huge banner saying, "Welcome back, Mrs. Jimenez," in bright purple letters. We practiced our surprise faces in the mirror at home and made sure everyone knew to stay quiet when she arrived. June came faster than expected with final tests and projects keeping us busy every single day. Graduation day arrived hot and sticky, with parents filling the gym while we lined up in alphabetical order wearing our best clothes. Mr. Gallegos stood at the front, adjusting the microphone when the side door opened and everyone gasped at once. Mrs. Jimenez rolled through the doorway in a wheelchair pushed by her daughter, while the entire gym erupted in applause. People jumped to their feet clapping and cheering, while tears ran down parents' faces and kids started crying too. The standing ovation kept going for 5 whole minutes with Mrs. Jimenez waving and smiling at everyone in the crowd. She looked thinner than before and moved carefully, but her smile was exactly the same as always. Mr. Gallegos helped arrange chairs so she could sit near the stage to watch us get our certificates. When they called each name, Mrs. Jimenez clapped louder than anyone else in the whole gym. Zayden's turn came, and he walked across the stage, looking down at his feet the entire time. After getting his certificate, he went straight to Mrs. Jimenez and bent down to hug her really carefully. I saw his mouth moving as he whispered something that made her pat his shoulder and nod her head. She pulled him closer, and I heard her say she was proud of how hard he'd worked to make things right. Other kids lined up to hug her too, and she held each of us for a few seconds. My turn came, and she squeezed my hand, telling me to keep being brave and kind, always. September arrived with new backpacks and fresh notebooks as we started 6th grade at the middle school. The elementary school newsletter mentioned Mrs. Jimenez was back teaching a new group of 5th graders. She'd created something called a kindness curriculum based on everything that happened with our class last year. Kids from her new class posted videos about daily kindness challenges and weekly empathy exercises she taught them. Our middle school principal called me and 7 other kids, including Zayden, to the office in October. He asked if we'd speak to the 6th graders about being responsible online and what happened last year. We spent 3 lunch periods preparing what to say and deciding who would talk about which parts. The assembly happened on a Thursday morning with 200 6th graders staring at us from the bleachers. Zayden went first, explaining how his anger about Pokemon cards led to terrible choices that hurt someone. He showed screenshots of his old posts and explained how quickly things got out of control online. Kids actually listened without laughing or making jokes because he was being completely honest about his mistakes. I talked about being a bystander and wishing I'd spoken up sooner when things started going wrong. Other kids shared their parts while teachers nodded and took notes about our presentations. The counselor announced that Zayden had started training to be a peer counselor for younger kids. He'd help students who struggled with anger or made bad choices online, like he had done. During lunch, I saw him sitting with a 4th grader who'd gotten in trouble for mean messages. Zayden showed the kid his notebook where he'd written down better ways to handle anger. The younger kid actually paid attention because Zayden understood exactly what he was going through. By spring, Zayden had helped 12 different kids learn to control their emotions and think before posting. The district held their annual teaching awards ceremony in April at the big auditorium downtown. Mrs. Jimenez won the Resilience and Dedication Award with her name announced over the loudspeakers. Our whole former class sat together in the front row cheering when she walked carefully to the stage. She gave a speech thanking everyone who helped her heal, but especially thanking our class for showing her how powerful forgiveness could be. Pictures from the ceremony showed all of us surrounding her with the award while she smiled bigger than ever. 2 years passed with us in 8th grade, taking harder classes and thinking about high school. Sometimes on Fridays, a group of us would walk to the elementary school to visit Mrs. Jimenez. She'd show us projects her current students were working on and tell us about their progress. Her classroom had a special bulletin board with pictures from our 5th grade year, including one of Zayden. She used our story to teach new classes about making good choices and treating people with respect. She never said Zayden's name when telling the story, but focused on how everyone deserves second chances. Looking back at everything that happened that winter still feels strange and sometimes hard to believe. We learned that one person's mistake can hurt many people, but also the communities can heal together. Forgiveness turned out to be more powerful than any of us expected back in 5th grade. Zayden works at the youth center, now teaching kids about digital citizenship and emotional control. Mrs. Jimenez still teaches 5th grade and sends us holiday cards every year with updates about her life. What started as the worst thing ever became the experience that taught us the most important lessons about being human. Well, folks, that's it for me today. Thanks for sticking with me and letting me throw my thoughts and questions out there along the way. I really appreciate it. Like the video, it helps more than you think.